question is, what's the best process for setting up the strategy analyzer? So, right. So let's pull up the strategy analyzer here, and there we go. All right. So with the strategy analyzer, one of the cool things is you could like backtest a whole instrument list. So I could go down here and I could build my own custom instrument list and backtest those instruments if I wanted to, or you could backtest your whole default instrument list. Kind of the benefits here. So, anyways, not to get too sidetracked. So what you want to do is, if you want to run Raven in the strategy analyzer, first thing that you want to do is you'll need to connect to your data feed, and then we want to go to the historical data manager. All right, and we'll go to the downloads tab, and you'll basically see your instrument list here, right? All your list here of instruments. And so if I wanted to say backtest on oil, then I'll select my oil continuous contract here, and depending on what type of bar, I may need to download tick data or minute data, and of course select your appropriate start date. So if you want to backtest a year's worth of data, then you'll need to change your start date to include a year's worth of data. And so just for the sake of speed, I'm just going to download this week's data here. So of course just hit download, and of course you just watch your control center and check to see when all that data is done downloading. And oil is pretty quick. That's why I used oil. All right, so the process is just go through, select your instruments that you want to backtest against in the strategy analyzer, download all that data, make sure you got the most current data there. All right, and then after you've downloaded the data, then here's the important step. You want to disconnect from your data feed. All right. So we don't know why, but there's something about the data feed that causes issues with the strategy analyzer. The only thing we can guesstimate is that it's a multi-threading issue with the data feed connection, whereas the strategy analyzer is not multi-threaded. So that's our assumption there. All right. So once you've got your data downloaded and you've disconnected, basically you're good to go. So at that point, then you can just bring up Raven. There we go. Bring up Raven, and set up the rest, and you're good to go. Let's see. One other note to mention here. In the options here, you notice how there's no option for backtesting here. So make sure that you take your start auto-enabled and set that to true, right? Because the auto-enable button needs to be set to on, and then your backtest mode becomes available, and you'll see it defaults to true there, right? So just remember to set the start auto-enabled on, set that to true, right? Enable that option. So. So there you go. Those are 3 key points for using the strategy analyzer. So, all right, I think that covers that question there. Yeah, I guess one last comment here. I know every once in a while we get comments, about people saying that NinjaTrader locks up or takes a long time, and that's very true about the strategy analyzer. It does lock up from time to time, and of course, depending on how much data you're backtesting, it could take a very long time, particularly if you're using Renko bars. So say you're you're trying to backtest against your Renko bars, or maybe you're backtesting against, our backtest Renko bars, right? Renko bars generate the most number of bars per day of most of the bar types. So of course, so the more bars that are generated per day, then of course that's more data that has to be analyzed, and of course that's just going to take NinjaTrader longer to do its backtesting, right? The more bars that gets generated, well, that's every bar is a piece of data that NinjaTrader has to backtest against. Um, so the amount of time that it takes to run a backtest, there's a ton of factors involved. The obvious factors are, how many days are you backtesting against? And then you take those number of days and then you multiply by how many bars are in that day. So if I'm testing and, so this approximately, this would be backtesting about 330 days. And then if I did a Renko settings like this, this could be about 5,000 bars per day. So it's 5,000 times 330 days, just to get a ballpark figure. That's a lot of bars. And it's just going to take Ninja a long time to crunch through all that data. And then the second consideration is the indicators that you're using with BloodHound. How complex are those indicators that you're using? You can rest assured that the indicators that you're using within your BloodHound system, if it takes a while to load up a workspace that has those indicators on the charts, and it takes a few minutes to load up your workspace, well, then that's at least a good kind of basic indication, that those indicators are complex and they take a while, to crunch through the data on that chart. And so that's definitely going to take NinjaTrader just that much longer, to crunch through 330 days worth of data, right? So, as far as the, so I guess the bottom line is that when people use the strategy analyzer, usually they're wanting to backtest a lot of days, of data, and of course you just got to expect that that's going to take a long, long time. So, my personal experience, I used to, way before BloodHound was ever invented, I used to code my own strategies, and I've run them in Ninja, and sometimes it would take NinjaTrader a whole week of running the strategy analyzer. So eventually NinjaTrader got through it all, but I just had to be patient and wait a week for that to happen. So, all right, yeah. So I think that's I think that's really all I have to mention to be aware of when using the strategy analyzer. All right, so let's see. The second question that was emailed in is, how does the file saving component work with BloodHound? How does the file saving work? So, all right, let's see. I'm going to use this chart today for BloodHound. So let's open up BloodHound here, and you can see there's no name yet. So let me put a name in here. So there's a convenient little change button there. And all right, today's the 18th. So there's today's BloodHound workshop file. All right, so there's a couple of ways to save your BloodHound system. So one is you can just manually go to File and click Save, or do a Save As, or if you just close the interface, that also saves, right? So BloodHound has a built-in mechanism that if this interface is ever closed, doesn't matter if you close it yourself or NinjaTrader could force it closed. Whenever it's closed, by whatever mechanism, it saves back to the file automatically, right? So closing this interface always saves back to the file to make sure that your whatever work you've done is always saved. So right, so when I click that red X, that saves back to the file. But also, if I'm working over, let's say, for example, I'm doing a bunch of work in BloodHound, and I go, oh, I wanna throw this indicator on my chart. I want to throw some indicator on my chart. I click OK, and what happened? Well, that forced a refresh on the chart, and you notice that forced BloodHound to close as well. So whenever the chart gets refreshed by whatever mechanism, that forces the interface to close. That and the forcing of that interface to close also saves back to the file, right? So BloodHound, has a double safeguard there, just to make sure that your work is always being saved, right? So if I go over here and the chart gets refreshed, BloodHound is forced to close. Well, that forcing of the BloodHound to close also saves back to the file as well. So Jacob's got a question that is basically about manual, well, not manual trading, but kind of automated discretionary trading, I guess could be a term for it. So he's going to use Raven to automate his trades, but he wants to discretionarily decide when to take the trade, right? So let's say okay, I'll use this as an example. I think this is a fair example of what Jacob is writing in about. So let's say we've got a little trend, going here, and so when there's a pullback, so I guess this is the discretionary part, is that when Jacob decides that there's a little pullback here and the Renko bars reverse, he wants to get a signal on that reversal bar right there, and then basically enable Raven to take the trade on this signal after this little pullback here. Right. So that's going to be really simple to do. Really simple here. So let me get a logic temp started here. So, all right, I think that should do good for a name. Some of these ideas, it's tough to come up with a name. All right, let me get things situated here. All right, so the simple version just requires one solver, and it's going to be the inflection solver. Right, so what is an inflection? An inflection means a change in direction. Right, an inflection is just the mathematical term for a change in direction. So, if you got a line, oops, it could be any change in direction. So if you've got a line like that, and then that line changes direction, well, that angle point, that's your inflection. That's your inflection point. So, and with charts only have two directions. Charts only have up, or charts have down. Right? There is no left and right direction on a chart. Right? Basically, when something has already happened, all that data, basically indicators can't go backwards. Right? So indicators can only go up or down in real time. Indicators cannot go from left to right or right to left. right? An indicator just forms on every new bar. So indicators have no left or right direction. Indicators only have an up or down. So, so an inflection just basically means a, either your indicator went from up and it reversed down, or it was going down and it reversed up. So that's all an inflection is. It's either a reversal up or a reversal down. Pretty simple concept. So when we're looking at bars, especially with Renko bars, that's why people love Renko bars, it's pretty easy to see when your bar direction changes, right? So you get these, with Renkos, you get these inflection bars right there, right? So there's an inflection bar, and of course you got two inflection bars in a row, right? We got a reversal up and then a reversal down, so both of those are inflection bars or reversal bars. So we're going to take our inflection solver here, and we're just going to look for a price inflection. So I'm just going to give this a name, and then the type, we're going to change our type of data, our type of input to price, and we'll just look at the closing price there. And there we go. So now we can see the signals on here. So at all those reversal points, right, there's a trade signal. So if we just kind of focus on this bar here that we were talking about again, right, there is our long signal out of BloodHound right there. So that's the simple version. And of course you could just put this into Raven and turn Raven on and off when you've decided that there is a pullback, enough of a pullback. Or we could build in some filters to this as well. So let's see. So let's kind of think of some filters here. So a pullback, usually a pullback, would have a minimum number of bars, right? If you get too many Renko bars on a pullback, then it's really no longer a pullback if there's too many bars. So let's see. Let's open this up here. Yeah, so let's just say this, for example. So here we are. We see a trend here, and then we go, oh, looks like a pullback. Well, after a while, after too many bars, well, that no longer looks like a pullback anymore because there was just too many bars there. So you could count the number of bars, and you could yourself decide arbitrarily how many bars is too many bars for a pullback, and you can set yourself a limit. So I will set I'll set a limit of let's say 6 bars. I'll set myself a limit of 6 bars. So let me switch over here. So if I set a limit of 6 bars, then this pullback will work because I got 4 bars there. Let's see, no, that's not a pullback. Yeah, this has about 8 bars here, so this would not work as a pullback. So I'll switch over to this part on my chart as a reference point. All right, so we're going to build a 6 bar pullback here. So let's see. Yeah, so I think I'm going to use the bar direction solver. And there's a couple of ways I can do this, so I'm just kind of thinking of what would be easiest to understand. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to go this route. So I'm going to use a look back node here to count the number of bars. I'm going to use a look back, and I don't want a displacement, so I'm going to set that to 0. And let's see, we said, actually, no, this is going to do the same thing. So no, forget the look back. I'll just use the settings in the bar direction here. So we're going to look for 6 bars. And actually, we're going to add 1 extra bar here. All right, so I'm going to look for 7 bars actually. Let's connect this up here. So if we take a look at this, all right, so what the bar direction is doing is when we get to the 7th bar, so when we get to our 7th bar here, right, we can see the bar direction is now saying, oh, hey, there's seven bars have been counted. But what we're interested in is the first 6 bars, right? So the first 6 bars, right, there's no output. And that's what we're interested in is we're interested in when there's no output. If we do get an output here, then that means more than 6 bars have been counted, and so if there is an output, that tells us that that's exceeded our pullback limit of 6 bars. Right, so when there's an output that says that that means we've gone more than 6 bars. So therefore, when there is an output, we actually want to kind of eliminate the signals coming from this inflection solver. So remember, this guy is generating our reversal signals, and the bar direction is going to be filtering out some of these signals here. So what we want is we want the blank areas, and then we want to get rid of the bars that actually have a signal on them. So we want to invert everything here. We actually want to invert everything. So I'm going to turn the inverter on, and so now can you see where there was no signal? Now we get both a long and a short signal, right? But then we also, inversely, where there used to be a short signal, we're getting a long only signal here, right? We're getting a long only signal here. But again, what we're interested in is this long and short signal together, right? Because when we get the long and short together, that is telling us that, oh, hey, we're within our first 6 bars of the pullback here. So what we can do is we can get rid of this long only output, and we can get rid of the short only output there. The way we can do that is we can use a long short modifier to do that. And the mode, so all we need to do is take our mode and set it to product, which is multiplication. So there we go. So that product, you can see here, right, it got rid of those short only signals and it got rid of the long only signals, and all we're left with is both signals there. So now if we look at the chart, right, we can see the chart is painted with a brownish color, which is red and green mixed together. And so we can see the chart is marked with the first 6 bars of the pullback. Well, it's just the first 6 bars of after a reversal point, after a reversal bar, right? So this doesn't tell us that this is a pullback. It just says that, hey, we had a reversal bar, and now here's the first 6 bars of that reversal bar. And we can use this as a filter. So, all right, and let's see. So the next thing we need to do is grab an AND node, and we're going to connect that in there. And let me shrink my chart up here. Shrink that chart up. And as soon as I connect this filter in, we'll see that a bunch of signals are going to disappear. And oh, right. I was going to point this out in a minute, but actually I have to point this out now. So there was one last thing that I needed to do with my bar direction, which was I needed to use the start bars ago. I need to set that to 1. And what that does, here before I change that, let me kind of stretch my chart out here. So what that's going to do, right, as you notice on this first reversal bar here, right, we have an output. So if I set this start bars to go to 1, it's going to do the same thing as a displacement function here. So if I set that to 1, basically what it did is it shifted my signal forward 1 bar. So you can see now there's no signal here on this bar. The signal got shifted forward 1 bar. All right. So I needed to shift my bar direction filter. I need to shift it forward 1 bar, so it's not sitting on the actual reversal bar there. It needs to be sitting on the next bar. So, and if we think about it, all right. So when I get this reversal for a pullback, you know, I don't need the signal on the first reversal bar. You know, I'll need it on the next one, because the next bar could become a reversal bar, or any bar after that. But you know, I don't need a filter on this bar here. So, and let's see. So now let's take a look here. So let's see if any additional filtering is needed. So now, this isn't a perfect system. It's all we did is add a 6-bar count filter. So for example, let's clean this up here. So let's say we're going along, and so you could, you know, decide that, you know, a downtrend had started. So you got a 6-bar pullback, and then you got your reversal bar down for a short. And so if you've decided that, oh, we're in a downtrend, well, since, you know, this little downtrend was less than 6 bars, we then get an up signal here, right? So we're getting, you know, basically we're going to get a signal whenever there's a you know, kind of like I guess they're not always pullbacks technically, but you know, whenever you get a change in direction with price, and it's 6 bars or less, you're going to get a signal here, right? So it's not, you know, remember this was built just for discretionary trading, so it's not perfect. You know, we'd need some more rules and filters to kind of filter this out. So, and Jacob didn't provide anything. You know, he's just, sounds like he's just going to trade this manually. But, you know, adding this bar count does add some convenience, you know, some filtering convenience there. And let's see, I'm going to rename this long short modifier here. I usually just like to put the name and the mode in there for the name. There we go. I kind of shortened that up a little bit. So, all right, so we've got something built here with a modest little filter in here, and of course you can decide, how many bars, what's your maximum number of bars that you consider as a pullback. Maybe you decide, well, I could handle 10 bars as a pullback, so you just take 10 and then add one extra bar to it because the start bar's a go. Right, so you just put 11 in there if you want 10 as your maximum, so maximum number of pullback bars. But for now, I'll just leave it at 6. And all right, yeah. So let's take this and put it into Raven, and just quickly demonstrate how we would use that in Raven here. So pull up Raven. And let's load up today's BloodHound system. So there it is. There's today's file. And I'm going to go select the logic template. So there's the logic template that we just built. All right, click OK. And then set my entry logic. So there is my entry logic. And I don't know what else Jacob might want, so I'll just throw some stuff in here. So let's just, I don't know, go with the 10 and 12 profit and stop loss, just to have something in there. And let's turn it on. And so you guys notice that I'm actually going to leave this start auto enabled to off. I'm going to leave that off because remember, these aren't perfect trading signals. These are, discretionary. So I don't want Raven to start trading as soon as it turns on. So I want to leave this to off. I want to leave it to false, leave it off on purpose, because the whole idea is that you manually turn Raven on to start trading when you see a nice trend that you like, and then you're waiting for a pullback. So I'll click OK, and there we go. Let's go to the chart, and yeah, we're in a bunch of chops, so unfortunately market's not really working with us. But if let's say we do, let's say if price does give us a little pullback here in the future, then all you have to do is just enable Raven. Once this pullback has started, then you can enable Raven and just wait for the bar to reverse, right? And if you don't get a little pullback reversal and the price just keeps dropping, then basically if price starts a downtrend, and of course now you're in a trend, well, then you can just turn Raven off and wait for your little pullback to begin, and then once another pullback begins, just turn Raven back on, just like so. Yep, that covered all of the emailed questions. So we've got a question about one of the outputs here. All right, so let's just take a look at the inflection solver. So one thing you'll notice about solvers, they all have, there's several things that they all have in common. They have this display area, they have a behavior, most of them have an input, but they all have an output section. Depending on what the solver does, right? Solvers do different things, right? One looks for a crossover, one does a comparison, is something above another thing. That's what a comparison does, is one thing above another thing. What's the slope of an indicator? Is it sloping up, sloping down? So, they all have outputs, but, you know, the type of an output, the names for the outputs can differ, but they all have outputs. So the question was, what is this output against direction? Sorry, there we go. Output against direction. So let's shrink that up so we can see that name there. So, all right. So by default, you can see we have a slope in direction. So if we look at the chart, and if we look, grab an arrow, right, we can see that, right, the output is with the direction of what we're measuring. So, right, so we're looking at price. So another way, so here's probably a better visual way of looking at what the solver's doing here. So, right, so this solver is looking at the closing price. So what I've got here is I've just got a line of the closing price, so we can actually see what the closing price looks like. And so we can see that the closing price does actually have a slope to it. See, right there, it's sloped up. So on this reversal bar, the closing price, reverse direction, and now it's sloping up. Right? And as price goes up, the closing price has an upward slope. So you can see the output is slope in direction. So when the closing price inflected and now it's sloping up, we got a long output, right? And then here, when we got a reversal down, now we can see the slope. The closing price is sloping down, so therefore we got short output. Now, if we use the against direction, that's just going to reverse stuff. That's just going to reverse the output. In simple terms, it just reverses the output. Because now, so here, the closing price is sloping down, but we're looking at the slope that's against the direction. So therefore, that's basically just kind of reversing the output. That's all that does. So, all right, it's just a convenient way to reverse the output without having to grab some function nodes to do that. So there's also, let's see here. You'll notice there's output decreases as inflection ages. So just to cover that quickly, so let me set, I need to set the look back to greater than 1. So now you notice that, right, we have basically 5 bars of a inflection. We have 5 bars with an inflection now. So if you're using the fuzzy logic, then what you could do is you could age those bars here. So like if I put 0.2 in there, you see how the output diminishes by 0.2 as time goes on. So I could put 0.1 in there, right? And the bars are going to decay by 0.1. So this is a way of using BloodHound's fuzzy logic capability. So can't say I've ever seen anybody use it, but someone who is thinking in fuzzy logic terms, those kind of guys usually don't come to us for support. So that's usually why I don't hear about people using the fuzzy logic capability, because they've got a good grasp of a good grasp of the concepts of BloodHound already. So all right, so there we go. I hope that explains it for you, Gary. So just think of it as basically reversing the output, which is different than inverting, right? An invert is different. If I turn the invert on, right, you can see it looks totally different. It inverts it. So you have an invert option, and then you kind of have a reverse signal option there. Okay, let's see. Maybe we'd like to use an EMA and an ADX. All right. All right. So we're looking for a low slope, or a minimal slope of the EMA, and also looking for the ADX to be, let's see, ADX below 25. All right. And he wants to use Renko bars. All right. Let's see here. Which one of these is an EMA? Not that one. All right, so the red one's an EMA. So it's a 89 period EMA. And we want an ADX with a 20 period. Yeah, all right. And we're looking for the ADX to be below 25. Okay. So good, the line's already on 25. Let me just make it a little thicker here. All right, well, it looks like we're in luck here. Kind of looks like the market's working with us pretty good. So, right, so we definitely have some consolidation going on there. And we can see that our ADX is below 25. And also our EMA is looking pretty flat here. So it looks like we've got a good situation to work with here. All right, so let's make a new logic template. And we need to come up with a name here. Let's see here. Yeah. All right. So let's see the easy one. Right, the easiest, the easy component here is measuring the ADX to see if it's below 25. So that just requires a threshold solver, like so. All right, connect that in. And let's give this a name here. So we're looking for the ADX to be less than 25. Okay, so let's set up our indicator in here. There's the ADX, and we have a 20 period. So we'll set that. There's only one plot, so that's already selected for us. We're good there. And all right, so next we need to put in 25. So and yeah. All right, so I'm gonna go. Let's see. Yeah, we can do it this way here. So now with this, so this consolidation, it doesn't sound like it's, consolidation doesn't have a trend direction. So I'm going to design the signal so that you get both long and short output because it's non-directional here. So here we go with the ADX, when it's below 25, we're going to get an output here. Right, so there we go. There's the ADX less than 25. So you can see what I've done is I put 25 in A and B. I put set 25 up twice, and that's because we're not using the fuzzy logic component. So the threshold solver is designed to give you a fuzzy logic output automatically, but if you use your threshold number twice, then that can eliminate the fuzzy logic output. So, and then if we look at the outputs, we can see greater than, right, the first label here is greater than 25. So that is set to 0 because, you know, we don't want an output if the indicator is greater than 25. But if the indicator is at 25, we want an output, or if the indicator is at 0, we'll get an output there. So we can see that from 0 to 25, we're getting an output. So that's for the long, and same thing for the short. So we're getting a short output if the ADX equals 0, or so anywhere from 0 to 25, that's where we're getting an output. So anything greater than 25, there's no output. Right, there we go. So let's see. Yeah, it looks like there's a lot of chop today. There we go. There's a little brief period of a trend going on there. All right, so I'll keep our chart on this spot here. All right, so there's the ADX done. Next, let's take a look at the slope of the EMA. So we're looking for basically kind of a flat, it sounds like Manny's looking for a flat slope here. So let's plug that slope solver in. And this is an EMA 89. And we're looking for a flat slope here. So, all right, so let's go put the EMA in. There's our EMA. Change the period, and there's only one plot, so we're good there. That's already selected for us. Okay, now we have to kind of determine what constitutes a flat slope. So generally, I like to start at 0.1. And again, we're going to need to look at our outputs here. So you can see by default, if we look at our outputs, it says greater than 0.1 ticks or at 0.1 ticks. So if we look at the chart, we can see that we're, let's see, I'll grab an arrow. We're getting an output when there actually is a slope on there, but when the EMA is really flat, there is no output, right? But we want the opposite, right? We actually want to detect the area where the circle is, right? We want to detect the area where the circle is, and we're trying to ignore when the EMA has a slope on it. So what we need to use are these other two outputs, right? Less than 0.0, less than 0.1 ticks, or at 0.1 ticks. So let's turn those outputs off, and we'll turn these on, like so. All right, now you can see where the circle is, now we're getting an output. And where the slope is, there's no output. There we go. So we've identified our flat areas like so. So, you know, you kind of have to decide, is it, you know, is 0.1 good, or 0.2. Should we use 0.2? That's pretty. That's a personal decision there. Maybe we can go 0.15, something in the middle. Anyways, so I'll go with 0.15. And then remember, so kind of consolidation areas are non-directional, so I'm going for a non-directional output. So I'm going to use the output against direction as well. And you can see now I'm getting a long and a short output from the slope solver. Right? So slope solver and our threshold solver, they're both going to be giving me a long and a short output. And last thing to do here is let's grab a AND node. And so there we go. So there is our both conditions together. So let's take a look right here. Right, so our ADX is below 25, but the EMA has a slope on it. So therefore, the EMA has a slope on it. So therefore, there's no output there. So in other words, there's no consolidation. So what we've identified is the areas of consolidation when both the EMA and the ADX, meet their conditions. Question here about, so we'd like to generate a signal when price crosses a indicator. All right, so price crossing a indicator, and I guess in this case it would be a moving average. All right, so let's generate a signal when price crosses a moving average. So, all right, so I'm going to make a new logic template here. All right, so let's look for price crossing over the EMA 89. So I've already got an EMA on my chart, so I'll just use that indicator. All right, so this is going to be pretty simple. We're just going to grab a crossover solver. Let's connect that up. All right, there we go. And let's see, let's name this solver here. Price crossing over the EMA 89. So we're going to set input A to price, and we're going to set input B to our EMA. So let's change our type to price. There we go. So we'll look for the closing price to cross that EMA, and then we'll set input B to our EMA. All right, got the EMA selected, put the period in there, and we're good to go. All right, so that's that. That was pretty straightforward. There we go. We can see all those crossing points on our chart now. So here's the question. So if you have a signal, then you want to block a signal immediately afterwards. So for here, we got a long signal. So now, so on the next bar, we want to make sure that there's no short signal on the next bar. So also inversely, on this first short signal, we want to make sure that, or we want to block a possible long signal on the next bar. So that's the idea. All right, let's see. So Again, I think I'll work with these Renko bars here. Yeah, these Renko bars will provide lots of opportunities here. So we have, like, there we go. We got a bunch of double reversals there. We got a double reversal there. So there we go. It gives us something to work with. Okay. And let's see. Yep. All right. So let me make a new logic template. So I'm actually going to use this crossover solver, as my signal generator. That's what we're looking at on the chart right now. So I'm just going to copy this logic template, copy it, and we'll rename it. So let's see. So we want to block. Let's see. What should we call this? Let's see. Block reversal signals. I guess, for lack of a better name. Let's see. I believe we can just do this with the signal blocker. I think that's all we're going to need. So let's put the signal blocker in there. Connect that up. And so we only need to block for just one bar, I believe. And just to make sure that the signal blocker is working as expected, right, we have this neat little blocked output capability. And if you look on the chart, what's cool about that is it helps you it helps you visualize how your signal blocker is working, how you got it set up. So that way you know you get the signal blocker set up correctly. And what you'll notice is you'll get these little blip of an output. So when you see these little outputs, so I set mine just to 0.2, so it just creates this little blip here. And what that tells you that the signal blocker is blocking a long signal, right? Since I get a little long output, I'm blocking a long signal right there. And also right there, I'm blocking a short signal. Right? So it's not working correctly quite yet because, so after this short signal, I want to block the long signal here. Right? But you can see I don't have a blocked long signal output. I actually have a full signal output here. So that, so I can, obviously I can tell just by seeing, but I could also tell that my signal blocker is not working correctly because I don't have this little 0.2 output, this little blip output, which should be on this bar. Not this bar, but it should be on this bar here. So we're going to have to change some of our resets here. So let's just turn them all off. Turn all the resets off. And then also we want to take this block opposite signal, because that's ultimately what Jeff wants, is he wants to block the opposite signal. Right, so just to clarify, we got this short signal and we want to block any opposite signal right afterwards. Right, so really this long signal is the one that we want to block. So we're going to set this to true. There. And there we go. If we take a look at our output, there is our little blocked output. But now we can also see that the signal blocker is blocking long and short at the same time. Actually, all of these are now blocking long and short at the same time. So that probably will do it for you.